I worked at 2 hospital placements during my last year of college. At one hospital, I worked with professionals that did therapeutic play with children on the paediatric ward, as well as the adolescent psych ward at the other hospital. My boss and I would do crafts and projects, art, etc., with the teens to help them have an outlet while they were getting treatment for mental illness, addiction issues, and other medical issues. Each day before we would see the teens, we would get a rundown from the nurses on the ward explaining who everyone was, what issues they had been hospitalised for, and any other info that we needed. This could include anything from a warning that the patient had violent tendencies, how they were adjusting to being on the ward, which patients they did or did not get along with, etc. So this one night, we were given the usual rundown of the teens on the ward, and the nurse mentioned one teen in particular. This girl, I will call her Sally, obviously not her real name, had all of a sudden just stopped talking one day and started to act really out of character. She would not respond to family, friends, siblings, doctors, or anyone for that matter. She was hospitalised because they became concerned about her harming herself, and they were definitely trying to ensure she was watched 24/7, just in case she was experiencing some type of psychosis. I don't know a ton of the details because we were just given a quick rundown of the patient's case. From what I was told, they had checked and ruled out a brain tumour and any other possible physiological causes and found nothing abnormal. Now, just to set the stage, this hospital is a very old hospital with dark hallways, poorly lit rooms, and the most coldest, creepy atmosphere I have ever experienced. In every way, it looked like a hospital you would see in a horror movie. And when walking down the hallways, I remember always being scared something would jump out at me because there were a lot of blind spots due to its very old layout. Anyway, this night in particular, my co-worker and I started the crafts and the activities for the kids in the kitchen, where we always did our activities. I was sitting close to Sally and tried to initiate conversations, but she would just stare blankly. My boss and co-worker tried as well, but Sally would not respond. And then, without warning, she would just occasionally look at us and laugh loudly, or smile at me with glossy eyes. The doctors had tried all day to get her to speak, and she said nothing, so I just chatted and tried my best to include her, even though she wouldn't really engage. I started to doodle on a piece of paper while talking with some of the other teens, and just randomly I wrote, "Hi," and drew around it, not really thinking about what I was doing. Almost immediately after I wrote hi, Sally picked up a pencil and wrote, "Hello." I was shocked to say the least. I was the first person in days and days that she had attempted to communicate with. I didn't even know what to say or what would happen next, but I wrote, "How are you?" And she actually wrote an answer. I was blown away. After Sally and I exchanged a couple more questions and answers, my co-worker noticed what was going on, so she kept the other teens busy and just nodded at me to keep going. Within a few minutes, this girl and I had written almost a page of conversation, and she was communicating through writing with no trouble. I couldn't believe what was happening. I was getting all this information from a girl that everyone thought was unreachable. We talked through writing for what seemed like hours, but it was probably just an hour. And while I talked to her, asking her about how she was feeling about being in the ward, she admitted through writing that she was scared. I pressed on, trying to see if she was scared because she was in a strange place or missed her family. But she wrote it was because she saw people in the room with us. Obviously, there were people in the room with us, so I asked her why the people in the room scared her, and she simply wrote, "They are dead." I swear, when I read that, it felt like my stomach hit the floor. I looked up from the page we were writing on, and she just looked at me, and then turned her head and stared at the door, and no one was there. Well, at least I didn't see anyone there. Sally stared at that door easily for a minute, and I swear she saw something there. I was more scared than I could have even expressed. I will never forget the look on her face. Whether or not there was a person or a ghost there, she could definitely see something. I took a few deep breaths, and once I had her attention again, we started communicating again through writing. We talked this way until 9 p.m. when I had to leave with my co-workers. I thanked Sally for speaking to me, and she seemed a lot more aware when I said goodbye, but she was still not verbalising yet. But I know that the doctors were going to do their very best to find out why. I collected the papers we had written and before leaving the ward, showed the entire conversation to my co-worker and the nurse that was in charge. Everybody on duty was dumbfounded that I'd actually been able to communicate with her, and they assured me that the pages would be passed along to the psychiatrist the next morning. I was filled with so many emotions. I was happy I'd spoken to her, and she was honest with me, but I was also still incredibly scared and shaken up. My co-worker dropped me off at work, and then I got home, and I remember walking into the living room, and my roommates knew immediately something had happened. I was shaking, and I blurted out everything that had happened. They were supportive, but also freaked out by the situation. I have never been happier to have roommates, because if I'd have gone home to an empty place, I probably wouldn't have slept for days. Sadly, because of the schedule I had, and because of the many different shift changes at the hospital, I never saw Sally again, and no one knew what the final diagnosis was for her. I still get chills when I think about the look on her face that night when she just stared at that door. I don't think I'll ever shake that feeling. I just hope she got the help that she needed. A few years back, I rented an apartment from a friend of mine. He had recently bought it and had it completely renovated. He put it up for sale, but couldn't find a buyer, so I offered to rent it in the meantime. After moving in, I realised that there was something wrong with the lady next door. She was about 45, but looked much older. She would sit up all night listening to Christian radio shows and talking loudly to someone. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep, so I went over to her place and asked her to keep it down. She opened the door and I got a quick peek inside. Her walls all had crosses painted on them in different colours, and words like Jesus and angels scribbled everywhere. The windows were painted black, letting no light in at all. It was damp, yellow-stained 50-year-old carpets, dog shit and cockroaches everywhere. No dog, though. I asked her to please keep it down. She just looked at me and shut the door. Then she turned up the radio even louder. The next night, I had my girlfriend staying over. I wake up in the middle of the night and see a shadow of a person next to my bed looking at us sleeping. I think I'm hallucinating, as I usually do in the dark when I'm sleepy. But then the shadow starts talking, and it's my neighbour, and she's holding something in her hand. She broke in during the night, and who knows how long she was stood there for. "You should lock your door at night," she says, and walks out. The next morning, I hear someone making strange noises below my bedroom window. It's my neighbour talking to herself again, but in tongue. She has a plastic bag in her hand with her dead, rotting dog inside. It's hot as hell outside, and I can smell the death from the bag. At this point, I'm scared shitless. She's obviously very insane. I go upstairs and knock on another person's door and ask what the hell is going on. This guy is as scared as me. Apparently, she broke into his apartment one evening as well, while he was watching TV with his kids. He got up from the couch to get a snack, only to find her behind the couch staring at him, holding a power drill. Now I know what was in her hand. At this stage, I'm basically pooping myself. I call the cops, and they know all about her already. Apparently, she is a violent schizophrenic and she hasn't taken her meds, but they can't force her or enter her apartment without her permission because she owns the place. The only thing that they can do is get her when she goes outside. So I sit up for the next 2 days waiting for her to run out her cigarettes. When I hear her leave at 2 a.m. to go across the road to the 7-Eleven, I call the cops. They have 3 cars and a special van over in less than 2 minutes. They restrain her, throw her in the van and drive off to some institution, and in less than a minute it was like she was never there. I never see her again, but I'm still having nightmares about her looking at me in my sleep. My parents' house got hit by a tornado when I was in high school. You don't realise how fast those things are until you've been in that situation. We live in rural North Carolina. Not exactly Tornado Alley, but we do get some bad storms now and again. My dad has this habit of liking to sit out and watch thunderstorms coming. We were all inside when we hear him yelling for us to come out. We walk out and the sky just looks surreal. There was a wall of black clouds sweeping towards our house at a disturbingly fast pace. When I say black, I don't mean like really dark grey or a steely blue. I mean black, jet black. Like an ink cloud from a giant octopus was squirted into the sky. I've never seen it before in my life, not even on a video, and I hope never to see it again. So we were pretty freaked out by the clouds, and the wind was picking up. I mean, those clouds were moving fast. Someone, I think my mum, said something to the effect of maybe we should get inside just to be safe. But things were starting to go crazy even before we turned round. The wind goes from 7 out of 10 on the windy scale to like a 25 in 3 seconds flat. We turned to get inside, and I'm the last to go in the door. I try to pull it closed behind me, but the wind is sucking the door open. I have to pull both hands on the knob and jerk back with my full body weight to get the door shut. At this point, it's probably been 45 seconds since my dad called us outside. We run to the hallway and start throwing things out of the closet under the stairs and climbing in. The whole house is full of this absolutely indescribable roaring noise. It was like a jet was taking off on our roof, or a train was driving through the living room. It wasn't so much the sound as a physical force. It made your head throb. It was so loud. You could feel it constantly in the pit of your stomach, like the boom from a loud bass speaker. But instead of having a beat, it was just constant. It felt like your eyeballs were quivering in your head. The pressure changes from the winds also screw with your sense of balance. I was getting that sense of vertigo you feel when you're standing at the top of a cliff and looking down. It was an absolute sensory overload. We all jump under the stairs and shut the door when we realise that we left the dog out of the house. My mum opens the door and yells for the dog, which comes barreling into the closet like a bat out of hell. We shut the door, and at this point it's been maybe a minute and a half since we were all sitting in the kitchen chatting, and my dad yelled for us to come outside and look at these crazy clouds. That's how long it took to go from a normal evening to absolute terror. We sat under the stairs for maybe that much time again. 2 minutes, probably 3 at the most. It seemed like longer, of course. Everything was shaking. I just waited for the walls to tear apart around us or debris to start smashing through the door. Then the sound passed and we came out. The house was still standing around us. So far, so good. We go back out on the front porch and the door won't open. I give it a heave and push it open a few feet and squeeze out. The porch is destroyed. We had a small barn sitting in the front of our house, and it had been absolutely obliterated. The tornado had picked up the barn, turned it into kindling, and threw it at the house. The posts on the front porch were all destroyed, and it was just covered with broken glass and nails, shattered 2x4s, and pieces of particle board. Looking out over our pasture in front of the house, where we kept a horse and some cows, there were just masses of trees down everywhere. 1 stand of pines to the south of our house, and probably 2 or 3 acres of trees in total, were just gone. Our cars were pockmarked with hail damage. Our full-size pontoon boat that we used for family trips to the lake on the weekends had been picked up from the front yard, rotated 90 degrees, and deposited back in the yard about 50 yards away. Behind our house, a massive poplar tree was down over in the driveway, and had fallen just a few feet from the house. Yet other things remained weirdly untouched. One of our barns was destroyed, but the other, standing maybe 30 yards away, wasn't even missing a shingle. All in all, we were incredibly lucky. The house sustained major damage, despite its appearance, though. The roof had to be replaced because the suction from the tornado made it unstable. In fact, to this day, you can still see the cracks in the walls in the corner of the top floor, where the tornado nearly sucked the roof off of the house. But we came out. None of us were hurt, and even slept in our own beds that night. So when I see stories like those of Oklahoma a few days ago, I always think back to those few minutes of terror and think how lucky I was that those weren't my last moments, as they were for so many there. When I was a baby, my dad played on the softball team. Typical social team, out for beers and pizza afterwards with the guys. Family event type thing. My parents were good friends with 2 of the other couples, and both of them had young kids too. On this occasion, the other 2 couples had left their kids at one of their houses with a babysitter that they were splitting. They invited my parents back to the house to have some more beers that night, but I was being fussy, so my mum nixed the idea, though they would have 100% normally have gone back to hang out. Well, it turned out my fussiness on that day saved our lives. When the other parents got back to the house, they walked in on a home invasion. 2 men had broken in, tied up the kids and the babysitter and her boyfriend, and were waiting for the parents. Took the parents as hostage as well, and then made the dads drive them to the banks where one dad was a manager and clear out the accounts in the safe. Then they came back to the house and slaughtered both families, the babysitter and her boyfriend, and the kids included. They caught the 2 guys later on. My dad attended the trials and said it was the first time he had ever had thoughts of supporting the death penalty. It still gives me chills to know how close we were to getting killed that day, too. My dad and some friends got drunk and went for a drive on some back roads and were going as fast as the truck would go when they were teenagers. My dad was slightly less drunk than the others and eventually demanded that they'd stop to let him get out. They pulled over and he and one other girl got out, and he and the other girl started walking the direction back to town while the other 3 sped off in the opposite direction. Well, less than a mile up the road from where they got out is an extremely sharp turn, which they missed, and they hit a tree going pretty close to triple digits miles per hour. 2 of them died on impact, and the only reason the 3rd survived is because they crashed in the front of the house that the 2 doctors lived in. The survivor was paralysed and lost his leg and part of his arm and was in hospital for 8 months before dying. This was back in the 60s, so medical care wasn't what it is today. When I first got my permit, my dad took me to the coroner to explain the importance of safe driving. It gave me goosebumps, just thinking about how close he was to being in that truck. He said that the dad of the driver had gotten what remained of the truck to be hung up in the town centre for months afterwards, to be a warning to everyone else. I was on vacation in Ithaca with my boyfriend at the time. We had literally, I'm talking 10 minutes, just gotten into town and stopped at a suspension bridge near Cornell's campus. I'm terrified of heights, and so my boyfriend was coaxing me step by step over the bridge. It was gorgeous, and we stopped in the middle to take a picture. On the side we had come from, there was a parking lot with steps leading to the bottom of the gorge, but on the far right side, there were hiking paths with no barrier. A woman walked past us and offered to take a picture for us, but we declined, and she just smiled and walked off quickly to the far side of the bridge, where she then smoothly jumped off into the gorge. There was not 1 second of hesitation. It was almost like she expected the path to keep going. Like, the sound of a person hitting the ground from a jump like that just sticks with you. Okay guys, that's going to do it for this video. If you found something you enjoyed from this content or would like to hear more content, feel free to subscribe and hit that notification bell to make sure you get notifications for future videos. And of course, don't forget to smash that thumbs up button. That would make me very, very happy. I've also got now a Reddit, so you could find me, same username, in Reddit. That'd be cool. And yeah, hope to see you all in the next video. Thank you.